So we are recording, and this will be available to folks afterwards as well. We made the first recording available, and it looks like a number of people found it useful. So excited to be able to do this all again. So I'm going to be very brief in my introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Veronica Young. I'm on the network team at Code for America, so I get to work with everyone in our network and as part of our brigade programs, as well as some of our wonderful partners who are also represented here on this call. So thank you everybody for joining us. I'm really excited that we are able to all put this session together to be able to talk through record clearance and some examples of record clearance projects within the space. We are joined by our fantastic partners at National Expungement Week. A special thank you to David and Matt on the criminal justice team at Code for America who have put together the content for today and put together the plan that includes a number of speakers and a real diversity of content today for us here. So I'm going to turn it over to them. If everyone can please remember to put your questions in the Q&A box. We have a couple of questions from last time that we didn't get to address, so we will start with those at the beginning of our Q&A session and go from there. Please remember that the chat default goes to all panelists, so a lot of your messages are only coming through to us right now, so just make sure that you hit all panelists and attendees so everybody can see your messages. And let's go ahead and get started. I will pass it over to David and Matt, and if we can all make sure when we're introducing ourselves to introduce with pronouns too. So my pronouns are she, her, and I will pass it over to you both.
Great. Hi, Matt Bernius, Principal User Researcher with Clear My Record, our criminal legal system work. And my pronouns are he, him. And so I'll be kicking it off today and taking us through the first part of this presentation, and then I will be turning it over to David. So again, thank you everybody for joining us for the second of this series. Now, we did want to begin with a content note that this deck is going to contain information about the criminal legal system, including a number of discussions about some of the challenges and trauma of living with a record. So just want to make sure everyone is prepared for that. So today's theme is going to be building off of our previous presentation, which for those of you who weren't able to make it last week is available online. And again, this copy of this deck will be going up online as well with the final recording. But if you are interested in learning more about the grounding within the criminal legal system and some of the foundations of our work, we discuss it in that part one. For today, our agenda is we're going to just go through a little bit of an introduction, have a discussion about record clearance needs. And what we mean by that is really talking about how we can center the people who are impacted by a record in our process. And so part of that will be a little bit of a discussion about the way that we do things at Code for America. And then we're super excited that we've got two amazing partners with us today, Cage Free Repair and the folks from National Expungement Week, who will talk a little bit about what successful partnerships look like. After that, we'll discuss some of the tech interventions that we've been doing both at Code for America and also with a number of our brigades talking about their projects as well. And if all goes well, we'll have about 20 minutes at the end left for QA and discussion. So our goals for today is to help everybody on this understand how to work with various stakeholders to understand their record clearance needs, really understand how you can start to reach out and build partnerships that center the folks who have been system impacted, and ultimately beginning to think about how and whether or not technological interventions are going to meet the needs that you hear coming out of that work. So, beginning with record clearance needs. One of the things that we feel incredibly strongly about at Code for America, and especially as our work has evolved and developed over these years, is that it is critical in whatever we do to center those who are most directly impacted by the systems we are working on. So what does that mean? If we want to think about centering as sort of like a series of circles or like a target, on the outer edge of this, we have government actors, and this could be court clerks and judges, law enforcement, from police and arresting agencies to prosecutors, and also extra governmental actors like background check companies. So these are folks who are directly part of the criminal justice system, or excuse me, criminal legal system in many cases. And it is important to take their views and their experiences into consideration. So one of the things that we do in our work is we'll often conduct interviews with them, and we'll see these tensions play out where on the one side, these individuals are often really deeply do care about trying to help folks clear their records. But at the same time, it's also understanding that they're working under their own pressures. So as you see in this quote, every time a new set of laws or something comes down, it just buries them under all this work, all these procedures that they have to learn. So you can intervene at this level and do work for them, but remember that we're still on the outer ring of the stakeholders who are involved. As we move a step in towards the center, we get to folks that directly help impacted people. And this can be legal aid organizations like we talked a lot last week, friends and family, community-based groups, and other nonprofits. In some cases, these groups include people who have been system impacted. But again, they're still just one step away. And again, they have their own specific needs. So this is from a legal aid attorney, where in order for them to help and do the work of clearing in those pieces, it's really important for them that they can understand every aspect of a disposition, of what someone's record is. And in that way, these folks act as a buffer between that outer ring, the government, and the inner ring, the directly impacted folks. Again, this is a ring where you can do work with, and you can choose to do work with. Ultimately, though, especially at Code for America, we're increasingly turning our focus to folks who are directly impacted. And we do this as a first step through conducting research, going out and speaking with them, trying to really understand their perspectives and their needs. And this is kind of the beginning of a broader process of centering folks. And it is through this that we start to understand, these perspectives. Like, you're going to go to court, it's a process. They set you up for failure in a sense, in the respect these systems are so complicated. It takes all of these things to actually clear a record. And so remembering those challenges and the challenges across all of these help us understand how to proceed in our work, and how to look for opportunities to actually make a difference. The thing to keep in mind with all of this is that, and I'll be completely honest, this includes us at Code for America, you don't often start this process by immediately jumping in and rolling up your sleeves and going to just focus on folks directly impacted. And the reality is that all of us are moving through a process where we're trying to understand how better and better to center those individuals, and understanding what are the processes and steps that it takes to be able to do that. Because all too often, the reality is that when people attempt to make changes and interventions within systems like the criminal legal system, the most impacted folks are left out of the efforts to reimagine it. And so when we think about centering, when we think about this practice, what we're really trying to do is think about how we can shift the power dynamics of change, and make sure, and this is critical, that we work with, not for, the most directly impacted people. And there's a lot in that I just want to spend a few minutes unpacking before we roll in and actually talk with partners who can really speak a little bit more about how that plays out in their day-to-day lives, and when they partner with organizations like Brigades or Code for America. So centering folks means that we really need to rethink the way we do things. And that's why I've been referring to this as a process. And there are two key ideas here, which is doing things with versus for, or in an even worse case, at. And what I mean by that is often the way that a lot of design processes or things are built, it's a bunch of really well-meaning people who decide, oh, I want to do this intervention for this community. And maybe I'll go and talk to a couple people in this community, but I'm pretty sure I know what they need. And that we have learned time and time again is antithetical to actually building solutions that will meet the real needs of those folks' lives. And so the progression is you start to design at people, like come up with something and give it to them. There's a second progression where you think about designing for people, where you might bring them in for some questioning or doing some external research. But ultimately, where we're trying to get to as an organization is designing with. And by that, I mean bringing impacted folks into every step of the process, treating them as partners, collaborating, not as people that we are coming in to help and we're going to just push everything towards them. And so there's this other concept that we talk about a lot, which is doing collaborative work versus extractive work. And extractive here means, and this is even a way of doing research, where it's like the idea of I, as an expert, quote unquote, researcher, quote unquote, expert, go into a community, talk to a bunch of people, extract or pull the information out from them, then go back and work in an isolated setting to try and create solutions. And instead, what we're advocating for, what we're recommending that everyone do is think about how do we truly not just try to take information out of a community, but rather work with them as the lived experience experts, bringing their own skills, their own view on this, and bringing them into our process as a partner to discuss how we can do things better. And that can be done at any of those levels. But there are a couple key things to keep in mind with that. And one of the most important things to keep in mind when we're talking about the criminal legal system is trauma. So trauma, and this is coming from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. They have an amazing PDF that we recommend that everyone downloads as a first start to really thinking about the role that trauma plays in any type of intervention, and ultimately, which I'll talk in a sec, what it means to be trauma informed. But we need to recognize that individual trauma results from an event or multiple events that are experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful to them, and that create these lasting adverse effects. And this is a really important part of it, that play out among an individual's mental, physical, social, emotional, and not just and spiritual well-being. Trauma isn't just simply an abstract concept. It manifests itself emotionally. It manifests itself in the body. And the reality that we have to face is that every aspect of the criminal legal system is traumatizing. So for those who were here last week, this was a quote that I presented, but this was a person talking about how the record was like a weight, like something around their neck that changed a decade plus of their life until they were able to clear it. And so every interaction with a record, whether we're talking about a person's time going through the process or even their time exiting with that record following them around, is constantly creating the conditions to traumatize and re-traumatize that individual, let alone their family, let alone their community. It spirals out from there. And so from that perspective, any criminal legal system intervention that anyone wants to partake in really needs to think about beginning from what we call a trauma-informed perspective that realizes and acknowledges the widespread impact of trauma, understands potential ways for recovery and how that can be addressed. Really importantly, recognizes the signs and symptoms of trauma. And why that's so important is when you're going into a community and talking about this, just simply asking someone to recount things or deal with this has the potential to re-traumatize, to bring up these moments of just profound physical, emotional manifestations of their experiences. And so in addition to being able to recognize that, it's also being able to respond to those. And so whenever you begin this work and you plan to do this work, you need to think about how trauma will play out within interactions and then how you work to bring healing into those communities. And so from this perspective, and really I'm hoping this is going to set up some of the conversation that we're about to get to, what we say when you're trying to seek out the people that you're working with. And by the way, there's one really important thing I should say about trauma in the criminal legal system, is it's not just necessarily reserved for people who've been directly impacted. Often we've seen that trauma can be secondary, that some people who are attempting to help these individuals end up taking on trauma as well. So it's not just, we need to think about these things in a really complex way. But we need to keep some things in mind. So like, who are you talking to and why? So when you decide that you're reaching out to people, what is the reason that you're reaching out to them? How are you going to find them? And what's equally important, especially as you move towards the center of that target, is how are you compensating them for their lived expertise? How are they participating in the project? It is not enough to simply go out and say to folks, hey, I'm going to build something for you. That's enough for you to give me all of your knowledge. And then again, in that extractive way, leave them out of the process. What are your research questions? What are the methods you're going to do to get at them? And as you start to think about these, how are you being trauma informed in your processes, both in the research techniques, and then additionally, how are you taking care of yourself and your other teammates after you've conducted the research or after a design session? And then that question again of how are you involving folks in the work beyond just extracting information from them? How are you moving from that at to for, and more importantly, to with, building that collaboration? This is an entire presentations take by itself. Our goal with this, though, was to start to present some of these questions. And two places that you can look for, at least the way that CFA has been working to advance our practice this way, and we are still in the learning stages of this, is one in our qualitative research practice guide. And then a second one is in my colleague Aditi Joshi's amazing blog post, Conducting Research with a Healing Mindset. Both are available from our website. I would highly recommend taking a look at both, and links will be in the presentation after that. The last thing I want to leave us with, as I kind of set David to take up this conversation, get really into talking with the folks who are the lived experts, and that's critical to understand in this, is that there are folks in the community who know this better than I could ever hope to. And so it's recognizing and celebrating their expertise is critical to moving this process forward, and being humble in that respect is a quote that comes from Adrienne Marie Brown, and this is critical in any partnership, is to move at the speed of trust. So you can only conduct work as quickly as you can build true and rock solid trust with the partners that you're working with. And so one of the things I'm looking forward to as part of the next discussion is learning a little bit more about what are ways to build that trust and to think through those pieces. So with that, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Oh, and if anyone has questions about this, these are great topics to bring up at the office hours that we'll be doing in addition to this work. And we'll bring up a bit more of that at the very end of this. I'm turning it over to David.
Thanks, Matt. That was such a good way to start this off. At our previous workshop, part one, that was focusing on the policy lens of record clearance, there were a lot of people who raised questions about partnerships. And I think how Matt framed this is a good bridge to actually actualize some of these strategies. And we wanted to give specific advice on what partnerships actually look like. There we go. So some ways that you can actually start doing this with other organizations. And this is kind of a focus on organizations in this section. First thing you want to do, of course, is to research the organizations in your area, but make sure that you're understanding who's already involved in this space. You don't want to just show up and act like you're in charge because you know how to code. You're not going to end up accomplishing anything or making any friends that way. But to set you off in the right direction, a lot of times the common, at least in terms of organizations, groups that are involved in this, you have legal aid groups like nonprofits, law schools, expungement clinics, bar associations, or any of those kind of things that are organized by the government. Sometimes you see like local state courts and things like that, or local courts and things like that will organize expungement clinics. You also have public defenders and defense attorney associations. Sometimes there's associations that represent defense attorneys. Sometimes public defenders will take on this work themselves. And you often see advocacy organizations and community organizations, and those can take a number of forms. Justice reform advocates, reentry services, people who focus on drug policy, people who focus on wraparound services, people who focus on restorative justice and reparative justice. A lot of times these kind of groups and these kind of people will be focused on records as well because of the enormous weight a record, the enormous impact a record has on people's lives. So how do you actually start approaching another organization? First things first, you have to do your homework about them. You don't want to really, just reach out for the sake of reaching out. It's really good if you go to their website, read their mission statement, look up their staff, learn about each one of the staff people there, review the main activities and programs, like what is their actual day-to-day work. And then take some time and get acquainted with their perspective through blog posts, sign up for their email list, check out their social media. When you have a pretty good grounding in what they do, you should reach out, describe what your interest in the work is, and ask if you can learn more about what they do. It's once you show that you have an interest in something and you've done your homework, it's a lot easier to get somebody to have a conversation with you. Learn about how record clearance fits into their work and see if there's opportunities to shadow that work. You'll learn a lot more if you are able to follow somebody instead of try to lead them right off the bat. And then discuss areas that your skills might be able to help them with their work. This is a good opportunity to explain what your brigade has done before. And then through those kind of conversations, it'll surface, where your skills and expertise overlap with the needs that they have. And one important thing to remember is that every connection leads to more connections. So it's not the case that every single time you reach out to somebody, boom, the two of you or the group of you will automatically have a project ready to go and ready to work on. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, I mean, in essence, time, patience, and humility. Like I was saying, first, second, third attempts at outreach might not go anywhere. You might spend hours and hours and hours of time working with a potential partner and then realize, a tech solution isn't the best thing to do here. But it's important because that's called showing up. And if you want to contribute to meaningful change, you have to learn to show up. So with that in mind, we've invited our friends at Cage Free Cannabis and Cage Free Repair, who also run National Expungement Week, to say a little bit about partnerships. I've put their website bios up on the screen here, but I'd like to allow Adam and Tori to introduce themselves.
I'll go first, Adam. Okay. Great rising, everyone. My name is Tori. I am the visionary and founder behind the movement that you all know as National Expungement Week. We are a national movement with the help of Adam Vine of Cage Free Cannabis and Cage Free Repair. Thank you, Adam. We have been doing National Expungement Week since 2018. The importance of it came about because of two reasons. The first reason was, if I'm being honest and transparent, I was being arrested, like maybe once a year. And I have now focused myself and centered myself on just, focusing on never doing it again and talking about what it looks like, just in case, you actually do catch a charge, and sometimes stack charges, and then what that process looks like to get back down to healing, which our mission is overall amnesty, right? Because once that happens, you can start a full healing process financially, emotionally, mentally, and like you said, spiritually. So, yeah, that is how we came about it. And the second reason was because, again, I met Adam by way of Cage Free Cannabis, and he is one of the dopest advocates that I know for social equity in the cannabis industry. And I was telling him, just from that perspective, it was hard because they didn't realize how many people were actually impacted and affected by the war on drugs and what that really looks like when it comes to ownership. And, I was like, a lot of us didn't understand ownership because some of us never wanted to own anything until cannabis became legal, right? But once they started doing the research like I did, ownership with a record is hard on any level. And we always advocate and we educate all our returning citizens when they come in by way of National Expungement Week. And if they're not eligible to be sealed, expunged, or pardoned, then we have other wraparound services like resume workshop readiness programs. We have food banks, we have clothing banks, we have daycare, we have break light clinics, and other things. So take it away, Adam.
Thank you, Tori. And thanks to everybody at Code for America for hosting us today. It's much appreciated. Um, so again, my name is Adam Vine. I'm a co-founder of Cage Free Cannabis and our partner nonprofit, Cage Free Repair. And together we help the cannabis industry and its consumers to repair harms of the war on drugs. Typically that work falls into one of three buckets, and those three buckets are equity, justice, and repair. Equity refers to what Tori was just speaking about, the ability of people who have been harmed by the war on drugs to own cannabis businesses. Justice refers to record clearance and other forms of legal relief that people who have been harmed by the war on drugs deserve as well. And then repair speaks to community reinvestment, whether in the form of cannabis tax revenue, corporate philanthropy, or otherwise. Those same communities that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs require significant amounts of investment. So those are the three areas of our focus. That led to my meeting Tori, and when she pitched this idea of a national movement focused around expungement, that sounded like something that needed to happen. So that's what we've been developing since the beginning of 2018. And Tori just completed the third annual National Expungement Week. So we're excited to talk more about these issues and answer any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Adam and Tori. I think people will probably end up putting questions in the chat, and if you're able to stick around towards the end, we can get, we're thinking about opening it up to a bigger discussion. I was wondering just right now, if you could go into a little bit more about how National Expungement Week works, as a national event. I imagine, well, I know there's, there's clinics and partnerships that take place all over the country. And I'm wondering how you go about making those kind of partnerships and what the relationship between, Cage Free Repair or just you folks as individuals, how do you manage those relationships? How do you approach other people? What do you look for when other people are approaching you?
From the perspective of National Expungement Week, it's a holistic approach. It's a healing approach. First and foremost, we always want to ground ourselves in our organizers. We always hope that there's an organizer that's in that community, that understands the need of their community. Because like you said, like, who knows what their community needs if they don't live in their community. So once we can find someone that can reach out to us and they're like, I think that I can put together this clinic, but how do I do it? I've never done it before. We have things like a toolkit. And after the toolkit, we also reach out to them via email. They call in and we just talk about things as Matt beautifully touched on. We talk about partnerships with legal aid. We talk about reaching out to our public defenders, and then push comes shove, because most of our fundraising goes towards legal fees, whether it's background checks, whether it's paying for IDs, whether it's paying for a ticket, just to allow someone to register to vote or have their voting rights restored. Those are things that we take care of. However, we don't know if the organizer in that city or state doesn't tell us what's going on, because we don't live there. So first and foremost, everything relies on the people in that city and state. And then from there, we can build on and build out. So did I answer that question? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I would just add, because there's such a patchwork of policy when it comes to record clearance, the partnerships look different in every place to address that. So in certain places, I'm here in Los Angeles, we've worked very effectively with the public defender's office here because they are well versed in doing this work. They set up clinics on their own. They were already doing that. So in cases like that, we just wanted to build on work that was already going on. We didn't want to reinvent anything or pretend like we were starting something new and building it on top of something that other groups were already good at. However, there are certainly cities and states where this kind of work is much newer. And we've had to stitch together these partnerships between individual organizers from directly impacted communities with legal aid groups or sometimes private attorneys who might themselves be somewhat new to this process. So it really looks different everywhere, but we found, I would think, that if you proceed from those core principles that Matt did beautifully touch on, centering people who have been the most impacted, and building out from there, you end up with the right results.
Great, thank you, thank you, thank you. I guess I'll ask one more question, and then, like I said, we can come back for the open floor discussion near the end. You've worked with Code for America before. I think National Day of Civic Hacking last year focused or coincided with National Expungement Week. I was wondering how those partnerships went. I'm actually pretty new at Code for America, so this will be educational for me. And if there were any particular projects that brigades were working on, or any Code for America, whether it's the staff on Clear My Record or a brigade, anything jumped out to you that is particularly helpful in meeting record clearance needs?
Yeah, I mean, I can touch on one here in Los Angeles again, just a specific event that I thought went quite well, in which one of our organizers, Ingrid Archie, who's just a brilliant advocate and organizer, who works with A New Way of Life, a reentry group here in LA. She presented to the Hack for LA Brigade about her experience. She was actually the first person in the state of California to have her cannabis conviction expunged after the passage of Prop 64. And speaking from that experience, while also putting on her hat as an advocate, and also working day in, day out with women who are coming back from incarceration, I think really provided a perspective that was needed for the brigade there. And if anyone is on from Hack for LA and was present there, I'd love to hear about it from your point of view too. But I think it was a really valuable example of centering the experience of someone who's been directly impacted. So that's what I would call to mind. But overall, I've really loved and enjoyed our partnership with Code for America. And yeah, I hope to see it blossom going forward.
Yeah, I'm way on the other side. I'm in Washington, D.C. And here in Washington, D.C. last year, it was really dope. I was able to attend DC Hackathon, and I saw people just in amazement, just learning how apps work and just seeing how to process And from there, it sparked conversations of legislation. And it's something that I always tell people, just being born and raised here in DC and agreeing to call this National Expungement Week when DC is not even a state. And so we don't have expungement. It's like, okay, that's the extra push we need. So to just, be a part of it last year was beautiful. To be a part of it this year, even with COVID by way of the webinar was a beautiful thing. And our organizer, Donnell in Arizona, he was so thankful that, the Brigade Network reached back out to him again.
Great. That's fantastic. Like I said, for everybody in the audience, we will be opening it up for a more, we'll do Q&A and a bigger discussion after this next section. So Adam and Tori are going to stick around and will be available for other questions as well. Okay, so we are talking about some of the products that Code for America has done so far. We're thinking it might be helpful to review some of the things that we've put together on the Clear My Record team, and then also review some of the Brigade's record clearance products as well, and give some of the Brigades a chance to go through and talk about the lessons, the origins of their products, the lessons, and what kind of opportunities they've raised before as well. So just some basic principles when we're talking about finding ways to intervene with tech in this, when we identify record clearance needs. We've been saying it and we'll say it again, build with, not for people, and make sure you're involving people who are directly impacted through every stage of the process. One thing about building something in this space, it doesn't need to solve every problem. It just needs to solve the right problem. And it's also really important to take stock of the lessons and opportunities that this work provides, whether that's resulting in a product or not, or you're still in the iteration process. You need to be able to take a step back and really process what's gone well, what hasn't, and where that might lead you in the future. Okay, so right before we go through some of these products, just wanted to say, like, here's some of the key questions that we were hoping to focus on through this discussion. Where did the original idea for the product come from? What's the need it's trying to address? Who are the intended users of it? How did Clear My Record or the Brigade work with those users? What partnerships did we make through the process? How do we go about making those partnerships? And what lessons can we draw from the experience? Some of the ways we'll zoom in on those things, for the products, we'll talk about scale, intended users, the record clearance function, what kind of platform it was on, what kind of integrations we have, and then whether it's still active or it's folded into something else, or if it's in a maintenance mode or what have you. So here's a few different ways that you can see how we zoom in on these, or we're going to zoom in on these questions, but we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis. And I think we'll start with the original Clear My Record. On the Clear My Record team, we call this classic, or we call it intake. And it was, we started making it in April of 2016, if you can remember that far back. So this is available still at clearmyrecord.org. And it's different than a lot of the products that people have come out with since. The intended users of this are people with records themselves. So you're looking around for what to do about your record, and you get to clearmyrecord.org. The main function of this is to connect you to legal aid. So you go on this, you put in some basic information, and it's like an intake form. It connects you to legal aid staff or public defenders around the state. Like I said, it's a website. It integrates with, I think it's 18 California counties that represent like a huge majority of the population here. But one of the problems with having a centralized tool is that we have a decentralized court system in California. So one of the cool things that we found out in creating the original clearmyrecord.org was that if we structure it this way as an intake tool, we'll be able to get people to apply to multiple counties at once. Like try, you know, you think you have convictions in Santa Barbara County and Alameda County. Like you can do one stop to try to approach both of those, which is easier than that without a centralized court system where you can file one expungement petition. That's the most efficient way we could come up with back at the time. Another thing is that structuring it this way puts us in the middle of the applicant and legal aid communications, which is an interesting role. You know, it as people have to trust us with particularly private information, and we have to send that along to trusted legal sources like public defenders. But it also has challenges, as I've mentioned before, with working with some brigade folks. This is kind of a beast to maintain. It was created by folks who are not on the staff at Code for America anymore. And so our software engineers who keep it going, it'll go down every now and then it'll go up down every now and then kind of out of nowhere. And then we have to panic and backtrack and figure out what went wrong. And it's not very clean under the hood. So it's been kind of a challenge to maintain it for a long time. But it's something that's still important to people and people still use it. I think about 18,000 people have connected to legal aid through it to date since 2016. In January 2018, we started working on a new product called Rap Assist. It's short for Rap Sheet Assistant. On the next slide, yeah, there we go. So the intended users for this were people with records themselves, and then legal aid staff who have clients with records. So the basic idea here was to help you generate a petition by automatically parsing your rap sheet and taking all that information that's on a rap sheet and turning it into something that could be used for a petition. In California, you can get a statewide rap sheet. So the scale of this is statewide. And it was intended to be a website that you can just go to, snap a photo of your rap sheet, and it'll do the rest for you. The team that made it used Google Cloud Vision, but it turns out that even with that cool integration, it was still really challenging to get a rap sheet that was machine readable. It had to be very pristine, like any wrinkles or smudges or anything made it extremely hard for the program to actually use any of this information in a standard way that was useful for anyone. Oh, no, that's okay. So after that, we started a 5-county pilot program in May 2018. You know, clearmyrecord.org and Rapsheet Assistant kind of surfaced the need, kind of surfaced the idea that the petition process is not as efficient as it could be. And so one way we thought to approach that was to, are there ways to just automatically clear records? Or is there a way to cut the petition process out of the loop? So Adam mentioned before Prop 64 in California. It made a bunch of, it made cannabis convictions, since they were no longer criminal offenses, it made them eligible for reduction, dismissal, and sealing. So we had this idea, and at the same time, the then district attorney of San Francisco, George Gascon, had a very similar idea where he was going to proactively clear eligible records rather than waiting for people to clear it through the petition process. So we worked with Gascon, and we created a software that parsed DOJ, or Department of Justice, criminal history data, and then pulled out all of the different convictions that were no longer considered crimes. And then it could put all that information together for a district attorney to bulk file, essentially. And so it worked well in San Francisco, and then we moved on to working with Contra Costa, San Joaquin, Sacramento, and eventually LA. It's interesting because it wasn't really a website, it wasn't really a desktop program, it was just a Mac command line tool. And you know, it required the team back then to go around to district attorneys' offices and like actually sit down with their computers. And so it was not the most user-friendly thing to do, but it was important to learn how this could work. It was also the first time with really programming eligibility, like being able to process this data source and figure out which convictions are eligible. But it also surfaced an interesting when we're talking about, and I was talking about the third circle, working with government partners, there are differences in incentives here. You know, the North Star for Clear My Record is to clear every single eligible conviction. And a district attorney might not have the same vision in mind. You know, a district attorney might want to clear only a certain amount of convictions. So it really surfaced the need to be aware of that and how software design could push eligibility to its maximum. After we did the county projects, again, the government kind of preempted where we were going with this and passed a law called AB 1793. And so we took the software that we built in the county projects and scaled it up to what we called bulk expungement analysis of records, or BEAR. And we launched this in August 2018. So again, this was that law, AB 1793, required all district attorneys to go ahead and bulk file all the eligible cannabis convictions. So essentially, it's the first time they tried automatic record clearance in California. And so we took that Mac command line tool and just turned it into a Windows desktop app and released it open source, no cost, to any district attorney who wanted to use it. I think about 2/3 of the district attorneys in California ended up using it. And it through that software, we were able to play a role in clearing, meaning reducing, dismissing, or sealing. I think it was almost, I think it was 65% of the eligible convictions. I think it was 144,000. So it was important, and it's it shows the need that if you can build something that really solves this problem, oh gosh, how do we take all of this huge, hundreds of thousands of lines from the Department of Justice, how do we turn that into something where the DAs can actually file this with the courts? So there, the only challenge with that is that the courts don't actually have a deadline to take all this information and turn it into anything. So we're still trying to figure out whether they've done it or not. But the DAs themselves, as of this summer, have had to file all of these, the bulk expungements. So rounding out the products that we've successfully launched so far, we just did this one a couple weeks ago, or was it last week? Last Wednesday. Internally, we call it the Cgla Tool. It means, that refers to Cabrini Green Legal Aid, which is one of our partners in Cook County, Illinois, where Chicago is. And this one's interesting because it pulls real-time Cook County data for individuals with records, not the convictions themselves. So legal aid can select eligible convictions to automatically prepare the petition. So what does that actually mean? This was a cool opportunity because we actually got to work with Tyler Technologies' case management system APIs. Tyler Technologies, their case management is one of the most almost universal, well, not yet, one of the most popular ways that courts manage their data, take case files and put it into a central repository. And so we were able to, working with CGLA and Tyler and the courts, able to negotiate this access through APIs to that case management system and be able to take that Tyler data and turn it into something that Cabrini Green Legal Aid could actually file as a petition. So it was really interesting because it showed us that we could use data from somebody besides the government. And one interesting thing is we didn't actually need to code eligibility into this tool. It was more about pulling all the convictions that were for an individual who's working with the legal aid, and then the legal aid has enough expertise to know which convictions are actually eligible themselves, so they can just go through a list and click which ones, and then it prepares a petition for them. So it's one step towards automation, but it's not quite automation because it doesn't file the petition itself. So as we've mentioned, we're focusing on trying to use our strengths to pass bills that have automation, automatic record clearance components, and then also figuring out ways to implement them. We're currently working in one state to assist with the implementation of automatic. They passed a clean slate law not too long ago. that addresses a range of misdemeanors that are eligible. So it's not just cannabis convictions this time. But behind the scenes, the data is pretty piecemeal and incomplete. And it's complicated because the eligible misdemeanors, they have them by class. So like class C and D misdemeanors are eligible, but there's limits on how many of those you can have. So it's not just all class C and D misdemeanors can get cleared. It's if you have more than 2, you get nothing. Or if you have, it's like that. There's a person level limit on the number of convictions you can have. So for us, what that means is that we have to basically build something that can accomplish entity resolution, essentially just matching all of this conviction data to individuals. And that, if you have somebody whose first name and last name match, but their date of birth matches, how confident, or their date of birth doesn't match, is that the same individual? If you have somebody whose first name and last name and date of birth match, but they have 2 different addresses listed on file, is that the same individual? So it's a really complicated process to take millions of lines of conviction data and boil it down to which individuals, and then have a script that can count the number of convictions they have to find out whether they're eligible. So it's the first time we're trying to implement this behind the scenes, but it's actually going surprisingly well. And we're hoping that in the near future, we'll be able to be a little bit more public about which state this is and what exactly we're doing in it. The other direction we're going right now, our product and software team has been focusing on something called delivering impact. And this is different than actually building something that can accomplish the legal side of record clearance, of like filing the record clearance petition. This is about what you do when your record is clear or clearer. Say we were able to clear every single eligible record in a state. What if people don't even know that happened though? What do they do? How does that help them in their lives? So we've been doing a discovery phase over the last few months, trying to see which ways a tech product could actually intervene and provide people whose records have been affected by record clearance, if they could provide them any service that would actually help them take the next step in their life. And one of the most important things about this is, and not just working with a legal aid group or expungement clinic or a district attorney or what have you, we have personally impacted people on the team, people who've directly been involved in this process. We've just brought them in as consultants so they can be involved in every single step of the way. And we can actually make sure that whatever we're doing really does address what they see as their needs in the space. So the next 3 things we'll go through are products that have been built by the brigade. So I guess we'll hand it off to Jordan to start.
Yeah, hi all, can you hear me? Sorry, can you all hear me?
Yeah, it's a little low, Jordan, but we can hear you.
All right, I'll just try to speak up. Yeah, so Record Sponge was created because a expungement lawyer in Oregon was running legal aid clinics for providing expungement, and he realized that there was an opportunity for a software solution because of 2 aspects of Oregon law. One is that the state criminal records are all available online if you have a subscription to the state database. And so that's obviously a big opportunity for a tech solution in the process. And another is that the criteria for performing expungement in Oregon is fully objective. So there's no appeal process. If you file an application, all you have to do is provide the information about your record, identifying information, and you just need to be eligible according to objective criteria. So let's see. So there is a demo online that is easy to check out. Although the software relies on a subscription access, there's a demo version that anyone can check out. But it, yeah, so it accesses a Tyler Technology database, which is also owned by the Justice Department. So we basically talked to both of those groups about what we wanted to do, and we didn't need anything from them other than just they said, cool, what you're doing is fine, because we still rely on the user providing login, and then we just perform page scraping in order to extract record information. So that was something that we were able to do completely on our own. But in order for this project to succeed, we needed a lot of help from our original user and client, the expungement lawyer. He gave us a ton of expertise. We needed a lot of feedback as we were implementing the law. And so we really couldn't have done it without him, and just continued support in his expertise. And then he was really essential to further networking. We found a couple of users providing legal aid. That took a lot of work. There was a lot of hit and miss communication with that, but we have some local users who are now using our software.
Micah, you can take it away.
Yeah, great. This is really amusing. It looks like we may have stumbled upon a very similar solution to Jordan there. We, as a brigade, our very first step was going to local legal aid branch, and we actually went there sort of pitching the idea of CourtBot as something that might help folks out in a way that we couldn't quite lay our finger on. But we're also very upfront with the fact that we weren't, committed to that or any other particular activity. Just use that as a conversation starter, really. And over a matter of weeks, months, ended up over at the one of the first expungement clinics that legal aid runs. And I sat down with another brigade member. We were able to sit down as they were processing some paperwork for a client and sort of watch things go through. And it was striking how slow it is to copy that much information off the internet with a pen on paper. So after some discussions, we landed on using a Chrome extension as a way of accessing the data, parsing it, and producing printable petitions for the legal aid clinic volunteers. It works out fairly smoothly. The big hurdle we were working around here is that the data is not, publicly accessible, provided by a third party, and we didn't want to get involved in obtaining permission to use the data. By using a browser plugin, essentially, we're just augmenting the permissions that the user already has. They have access to the data. The tool that we created just parses the dockets for the necessary information. And then, we've been working with legal aid to figure out what information is most valuable to them, what flags we can discover that are meaningful and accelerate their work, and just sort of iterating on that. It's not automated in any sense other than that it creates printable documents on its own. But we did find that, that first session that I sat in on, we were there for about 90 minutes and on the same, with the same client, and actually left before they were fully processed. These days, Vermont Legal Aid would be able to do something like that from beginning to end in about 15 or 20 minutes. So it is having an impact, and we've got a great growing relationship with legal aid, and we'll see where it goes from there. I think that's a decent summary.
This is me. So I'm Michelle from the Clean Slate Project at Code for Boston, pronouns she, her. So our situation was almost the exact opposite of the one in Oregon, where we have no access to public data, which is great in one regard and a little more difficult in another. That there is not really automatable expungement. Everything has to go to court. So we were kind of faced with this problem. What we had is an advocacy group come to us and say, we are trying to help with record expungement. These are 3 or 4 things that we'd be interested in. Can you help us with any of these things? And we said, I don't know, let's take a look. That was Citizens for Juvenile Justice in Boston. So we took a look. We pursued a few different paths and decided to go down 2 of them eventually. One was creating this app. Another one was having a data team that was trying to analyze various data we could obtain either from Massachusetts or other states. And that's a separate project, but I do think there's a role for other work other than apps. I just want to put that out there. But one of our challenges was not knowing the law, not knowing the context, and we didn't realize how much we didn't know about the context until we connected with our second partners, which was Greater Boston Legal Services. And they were absolutely amazing. They were a little hesitant at first, not exactly seeing, despite the existence of TurboTax out there, how a technical tool, a piece of technology could help in this particular situation. Over time, we've built a rapport. They didn't want to start with expungement because of that reluctance. And so we started with sealing juvenile records. And that experience has been incredibly positive. And now they want to move forward with like 10 other projects. And we go, okay, let's start with one. But they have, a lot of ideas about how this stuff can help in their work. And ours is actually approaching being accessible to pro se users. So pro se meaning non-legal professionals or volunteers. We have 2 entry points, one for petitioners, people applying to clear their records, and one for clinic volunteers that takes petitioners through a kind of a more gradual process. Now, without access to any of the data, we have to trust on what the person knows. We had to work really closely with our partner on how to ask the questions in a way that people would have a chance of answering them accurately. Fortunately, there isn't any penalty in Massachusetts for applying incorrectly, or applying when the eligibility criteria does not fit and they get rejected. We're hoping this has gone live, and we're hoping to present it at a sealing clinic. One of the most challenging parts has been getting users to the table. It's been an incredible challenge. We don't have really the skill set necessary or the resources necessary. We managed to get some people in and do some initial research, and we're hoping that by attending these sealing clinics, we might have the opportunity to talk to people about their experiences there. I don't remember what I've not covered, but I'm sure if there are questions afterwards, I would be happy to answer them. If you all have any questions of something I have missed. And that is, I didn't realize we had a picture. I'm incredibly impressed. I could do a short demo of a pro se form, but there is that picture up there, or I could provide the link. I don't know what we have time for. You tell me.
Yeah, we're doing pretty well on time, actually. We were thinking about 20 minutes to wrap up for a discussion, but we do have a few minutes if anyone wants to give a quick demo. It'd have to be pretty quick, but yeah, we can stop screen sharing and then let
Sure.
someone take it over.
I can do a quick demo. It's pretty, oh, I cannot screen share while other people are screen sharing. So
Yeah, 1 second, I think.
no worries. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and then after, we'll get back to it, but in the published version of this deck that we'll send around afterwards, there's going to be a link to the brigade's project canvases that they created this summer that have a lot more information about everything everyone talked about, but like start to finish, and like what all the different partnerships look like and the history of it and the challenges and all that kind of stuff. So they'll be available. There's going to be links available in the published version of this deck.
Yep, and just to add on to that, those project canvases are also available on the Brigade website. So if you go to brigades.codeforamerica.org and then priority action areas, there are project canvases for 3 out of our 4 priority action areas, and creating pathways to record clearance is one of them. So that's where you can find these project canvases.
That's great. Thank you. So one of our challenges with there's so many design challenges, I could talk for hours, but is presenting the appropriate amount of information at the right amount of time, at the appropriate time. This is the entry point for a petitioner. And you have basically these pretty simple questions that, took months to create. But, do you have a Massachusetts record? If you say, I don't know, it takes you here to give you a, suggestion for where to find out whether you have a record. This is a question I won't cover because it's very complicated about the role of docket sheets and certified copies of docket sheets. So I'll just say yes. Do you have any open cases? No. Now, are you on probation is the same as an open case, but people don't know that. So that is asked separately. You continue. When you get to the end of this process, if you don't get to the end of this process, if you say, yes, I was incarcerated, you get a screen with more resources, a clear message, they're not eligible, and more resources. Oh, sorry, just did the same thing. And then you get the opportunity to, it says you can keep using this form to put your personal information here, which will be stored securely, or you can finish by hand, which means you'll be able to print the form and send in your, and not put your information into the computer, because that is somewhat of a concern that people express to us. And then you can download it and it gives you your next steps, which are long, but we're still working on how to present the content in a way that is more digestible. That's, I think, about it. How do I get out of here? So a fairly short form for an incredible amount of work. It does not reflect the amount of work that went into that, but we're happy to have it up. Thank you.
Did anyone else want to give a quick demo, or should we jump to discussion? Okay. Yeah, I guess we can jump to the Q&A first and then just open it up. There were a couple questions last time from part 1 that I wasn't able to get to. So Veronica helpfully reminded me about them. There was one, can you share a little more about what the best case scenario outcome is in California? In California, are records just cleared automatically for those who are eligible? Is that correct? So I think this question is specifically focusing on California. The way it works in California is cannabis convictions are automatically cleared most of them, and clearing means reducing them from felonies to misdemeanors, dismissing them, and then having those records sealed. That happened automatically, or it's in the process of technically happening this year because of AB 1793 and that product we were talking about earlier, BEAR. In terms of other records, they will be automatically cleared if they take place in 2021 or after, and that's eligible records. And eligibility in California basically means, was it something you didn't go to prison for, essentially? And so if you get convicted of something after 2021, then in the future, it'll be eligible to be cleared if you didn't have to go to prison for it. That means looking backwards, if it wasn't a cannabis conviction and you didn't go to prison, but it happened before 2021, then you're not eligible for automatic yet. And so that needs to be a policy change more than a technology change. There was one other question, it's very similar. Hi, I'm not sure if you have the answers, but I was wondering if you might be able to speak on who is often let out of the automatic record or left out of the automatic record clearance process, and who could benefit from something like help with steps in the non-automated clearance process. This was from Hack for LA. Our team is trying to see what additional apps we can build on to assist the process, and understanding where the gaps are would help us. So in terms of California specifically, things that focus on helping people clear their records that already exist and weren't cannabis related. That's the main area of need. And like I said, it would take a policy change in order to automate that. In general, the people who usually get left behind by automatic record clearance, and keep in mind that there's not a lot of states that have widespread record clearance in an automated way, but the people who tend to get left behind are people with felony convictions. And that's pretty similar to the way it works with normal record clearance through the petition process. And again, those are a lot of times policy changes as much or maybe more than they are tech interventions. It's step by step, hopefully, cannabis in some states, lots of misdemeanors in some states, and then hopefully there's going to be eligibility for felonies, because those are what really matter the most on people's background checks. Michigan passed a clean slate law that automates record clearance recently, and they finally actually did have some felonies in there. And in California, the prospective one that'll start in 2021 and in the future has some felonies, but they're felonies that didn't send you to prison, essentially.
Okay, great. Are we looking for the next questions, David?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, let's start with the first one. Sean asked a little while ago, how is software maintenance upkeep weighed when creating tech solutions? It's simple to launch software, but maintaining it and improving it are much tougher. How has that played out in your projects?
I'm happy to make a comment about that. So when we first started with Citizens for Juvenile Justice, their tech team was non-existent. So we at first determined to make a site that would inform people very generally if there was a chance their case was eligible and that kind of thing, trying to meet them where they're at, something with Squarespace. I think it's really important to be able to pass on the project to a permanent home if you're not going to maintain it. And that means meeting that permanent home where it is at, technologically speaking. Because of our partnership with Greater Boston Legal Services, they had a tech team that was familiar with a certain kind of platform called DocAssemble that makes forms and printable PDFs and stuff very accessible in a lot of ways. And though we did not code in Python and we were not familiar with DocAssemble, we said, okay, so this is what we're developing in, because that's the technology that can be maintained afterwards. by the folks at who were going to keep their project.
Okay, we can go to Whitney's question next. So Whitney, I'm going to put on the function that allows you to talk.
Thanks, Veronica. Appreciate it. It looks like from what you, what everybody was talking about, the different phases, like the research phase and, doing, user interviews and, outreach, and then the coding part and the maintenance part. How much, if of any, are these projects, both the actual coding part and then also the information gathering and the technical expertise and all that? What part is done by full-time CFA employees versus what part is done by Code for America Brigade volunteers? And how do you juggle the full-time, the people who are, if there are any full-time, coders or, legal experts, et cetera, with people who maybe jump in and out or are a little bit less, a little bit less frequent, or don't have the most reliable schedules? How do you juggle that and make it still solid? Thanks Veronica.
Matt, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. I can start on the Code for America side, which is the projects that David outlined were specifically done by Code for America staff. And so each one had their own teams working on those things. So they were cases where there were not brigades specifically working on those projects. Likewise, as far as I know, all the brigades worked on the projects by themselves. So I think we can turn that over to them, to all of you, to share your experiences.
I could jump in on that a little bit, as it's literally been going on today. It is just a volunteer effort on our side. We don't have any, no budget, no paid folks at all. And to date, we haven't coordinated with Vermont Legal Aid. Singular overworked technology person. What we have been able to do is arrange a fair amount of redundancy on our team, making sure that we work with groups like the Project Management Institute in our town to make sure that we have fairly experienced project managers involved, reaching out to folks who are themselves attorneys has been just vital. The fellow who would normally be talking in my place, Jake Durrell, is himself an attorney, and the knowledge that he can provide just from familiarity with studying law, would have set us back a year easy if we had to learn it all ourselves. So redundancy, I guess, is our answer, not money in our case.
Great, thank you. Moving on to our next question, Janet asks, court records are public records, quote unquote, but access to that data is licensed to companies like Tyler Technology, who in turn create products that make the data useful to their own customers. Is that correct?
Kind of. So what Tyler and a lot of companies like them create are what are called case management systems, or CMSs. So those are literally the systems that courts are using to enter the records, to basically workflow and move them through. So it's a software as service type case. So the data is not licensed to Tyler in the respect that Tyler can sell the data to other sources. But basically Tyler is the tool for getting access to the data. And so a lot of what this comes down to is whether or not a county or where you're in a unified state has a way to provide bulk access to the data or API access. Pretty much anyone can go down to the courthouse and request a single record, but it's trying to easily extract that in the ways that we've been doing or some of the brigades have been doing that create the challenges there.
Great, thank you. And then I think Tori is going to answer our last question, which is for people speaking about their projects, how are their connections with legal aid organizations made? Did they go out pitching expungement? Did organizations hear about Code for America somehow and come looking for them? This question comes from Matt.
All of the above. So because, you know, we have a week of action during September last year, we actually had Iowa Legal Aid reach out to us because they were in the process of having a clinic the same during our week of action. So sometimes that happens. And when that happens, like, that's great. That's really good. And that means we just have to find the nuance of, you know, the holistic whole healing community part, because, you know, they know their lane, that's their job. And we know what our lane and our job is, right? So we do that. And then we always follow up with other legal aids and, you know, even public defenders, anybody that we can with our impact report, and to always let them know what we have going on. So I guess you can say our impact report about, you know, just what we've been doing since 2018 is like our pitch deck to kind of ask for more help and more assistance so we can continue doing what we do. With Code for America, Adam, I'm going to let Adam take it away. I was blown away when he was able to make the connection, because I was like, where do we start? How do we make this work? Because this is needed.
Yeah, I think I just reached out directly. I'd been witnessing the tremendous work that Code was doing, particularly here in California, and knew that you know, our missions were aligned. You know, even though we tend to provide in-person support for people, what we advocate for, what communities need, is automated expungement and expanded access to that. So these things go hand in hand, and so we just wanted to build that bridge. And that has been echoed. I do want to shout out one person. We have an advisory board member named Jose Gallegos, who's currently incarcerated, and you know, I keep him up to date on everything that we're doing. And he recently sent me a letter, essentially with this idea for an app that would centralize this process, that would, you know, provide people coming back from incarceration with access to the documents that they need, and then help them start to navigate this process, whether in an automated way or more of a manual way. Either way, it would centralize the process and potentially connect that applicant to wraparound services as well. So everything pointed to a collaboration, and I just wanted to shout that out. Thank you so much.
Great. Let's see. Lisa asked a question about the office hours. So please share more about office hours to support local brigades. It sounds like this will be a big project that takes a while. Yes, I think any kind of project, you know, really any project, but particularly projects in the criminal justice space require so much working in partnership and iteration. So we have, as part of the application to sign up for this working group, there's a question on whether your brigade was interested in signing up for office hours with the Criminal Justice Team at Code for America. We received a ton of people that were interested in both the working group series and the office hours. So we are going to be reaching out to the people that said that yes, they were interested in office hours, to schedule some time at the beginning of next year, so that you can talk one-on-one with a member of the Criminal Justice Team at Code for America, or you and your brigade can talk one-on-one. So it'll be by brigade. And then on top of that, I think this is one of the, you know, really great parts of being able to be part of this network, is that there is always opportunity opportunity to connect with other folks. I know the criminal justice team is always interested in being available to touch base with folks that are working on projects. There's been a lot of touching base and various amounts of coordination already, and there will continue to be. So if you ever have any questions or you need anything, please reach out to either myself or David or Matt or somebody on the criminal justice team directly. I know that the folks that presented here today are also really excited to be able to support other brigades in this work to the extent that they're able to. There's the Clean Slate channel on Slack, which is a great way to kind of keep up to date on projects in this space. And like I said, you can feel free to reach out to anybody that's here, and we can at the very least, point you in the right direction. Emerson asked how the existing initiatives here could be linked to cash bail. I think this will be our last question, but does anyone on the panelist group have an answer for Emerson?
Oh, what an interesting question. And not something off the top of my head, but I'm really curious if anyone else had something spring to mind.
I mean, I could say one thing in that this is actually an area where we need to be very careful, because there's a lot of intent to do away with cash bail and replace it with algorithms that determine a person's risk factor. But often those algorithms merely reinforce the sort of systemic racial bias that already exists in the system. So I think we need to be very careful when we're talking about replacing cash bail with technology and just turning over our races into a computer.
That became a big issue in California with the most recent election. The legislature did exactly what Adam mentioned about voting to get rid of cash bail and replace it with the risk assessment algorithm, but there was no transparency or guidelines about how those decisions were made. And so it created a situation where you have the cash bail industry trying to overturn an initiative to end cash bail, and then also frontline impacted activists trying to overturn that same thing. But strange bedfellows in a way.
All right, well, we are at our ending time, so I will start to wrap us up. I just want to say thank you to everybody who is a part of this call. Thank you to everybody who attended. Thank you to everyone that is doing great work in their communities. Please feel free to reach out to anyone here to talk more. A special thank you to Michelle, Adam, Micah, Tori, Jordan, and David and Matt for putting this together. It's so great to see everyone here this evening, and this video will be posted, and we will be in touch with folks for office hours. Have a wonderful holidays and end of 2020, which I think so many of us are looking forward to. So thanks so much, and we will talk to you soon.